Hi, my name's Thatcher. I came home from deployment 3 days before Christmas. No warning, no parade, just me trying to surprise my daughter. But instead of joy, I walked into a house that smelled like artificial peace. No sign of her room, no toys, no drawings, just silence wrapped in lavender-scented lies. And then she whispered it. My legs hurt. I can't sit. Everyone said she was dramatic, said I was overreacting. But bruises don't lie. Neither do audio recordings, or missing medical notes, or stolen bank accounts. Why was a 6-year-old hiding notes inside a stuffed bear just to be heard? And why did the people who were supposed to protect her stay quiet? End of hook. It was almost 11 when I turned onto the old cul-de-sac, headlights catching the familiar outline of a house that used to mean warmth. The snow had started again, just a whisper on the windshield, but it was enough to soften the edges of the world, enough to make it feel like a Christmas card. I'd driven all day, pushing through icy highways with just enough coffee and old country ballads to keep me grounded. Springfield hadn't changed. The same gas station on 8th still flickered half its sign. But the house looked different. It had wreaths, sure. Seraphine always did love appearances, but the lights in the window weren't on. No flicker of TV, no sound of wrapping paper or music or little footsteps running around in socks. When I parked, the porch light blinked on, motion sensor still working. That tiny detail made me pause. Everything else felt off, but that damn light knew me. I opened the door with my own key, still hidden under the fake stone rabbit in the flower bed, and stepped inside. It was warm and smelled faintly of lavender and something citrusy, the kind of artificial scent that came from plug-ins, not baking. Thatcher? Seraphine's voice called out, not alarmed, just curious. I stepped into the hallway, boots crunching faintly on the rug. She appeared from the kitchen in one of those spotless aprons, hair in a neat twist, holding a dish towel. "You're early," she said, not quite smiling. "I thought you'd be in tomorrow morning." "I caught an earlier break. Figured I'd surprise you." "You did." She glanced behind me, as if expecting someone else. Then back to me. "Kaylin's asleep. She had a big day." I nodded, but something tugged at me. A silence under the words. I set my bag down gently. "Where is she sleeping?" "In the living room," Seraphine said casually. "She's been enjoying the couch lately. Says it feels cozier." I looked over. There she was, tucked beneath a throw blanket near the base of the stairs. Her tiny frame curled in, too still. No stuffed animals, no books. Just a single pillow and a blanket that didn't smell like her. I walked over, sat beside her gently. Her breath was slow, shallow. I brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. She flinched. That alone, just that, snapped something in me. Seraphine stood behind me. "She's fine, really. She just likes the spot." "Why?" I asked softly, not turning around. "Where's her room? Her toys?" "She's growing up," Seraphine offered, too fast. "She's been into books lately. Doesn't play much anymore." Kaylin stirred. I touched her hand. She opened her eyes, barely, then whispered, "My legs hurt. I can't sit, Mommy." I froze. It wasn't just the words. It was how she said them. Flat. Not complaining. Not like a child with a scrape, but like someone used to pain. I glanced up. Seraphine was wiping her hands again on that same dish towel, eyes blank. "She must have fallen earlier," she said. "She trips all the time." I looked down at Kaylin. "Where do they hurt, sweetheart?" She didn't answer. She just looked past me, not through me, past me, like I wasn't the one she expected to protect her. I picked her up gently, felt her arms hang limp around my neck. Her head against my shoulder was warm, but her body didn't mold into mine like it used to. It was like holding a memory, a reminder. I took her upstairs. The hallway felt colder than it should have. Her room, if you could still call it that, had clean sheets. No drawings on the wall, No clothes tossed around. A book on the nightstand that looked unread. It was a room staged for a child, not lived in by one. I laid her down, pulled the blanket up to her chin. She didn't say anything. I sat beside her, not touching, just listening. And I realized something then. This wasn't a child recovering from a fall. This was a child surviving something I hadn't seen coming. The next morning, the sun never really rose, just pressed a pale gray across the snow. The house was silent in a way that didn't feel sleepy. It felt hollow, like a hotel room after checkout. I walked into the kitchen to find Seraphine already dressed, hair tight, makeup flawless, placing perfectly triangular slices of toast onto Kaylin's plastic plate. She glanced up. "Coffee's fresh," she said, as if we were old colleagues who happened to share a kitchen. "Thanks," I said, though I didn't reach for the pot. I sat across from her. Kaylin sat at the end of the table, small and too still, her fork dragging across scrambled eggs without actually eating. "You sleep all right?" Seraphine asked, reaching for the butter. "Fine," I said. "Kaylin?" "She's always like this in the mornings," Seraphine said. "Quiet thinker." I glanced around. The walls were bare. No crayon marks, no photos from school, no messy calendar with scribbled field trips or birthday parties. Just framed quotes about gratitude and one of those farmhouse-style wooden signs that said, "Live, laugh, love." Kaylin's eyes didn't move. Her feet didn't touch the floor. She looked like a guest who wasn't sure how long she was welcome. After breakfast, I moved through the house slowly, letting my boots creak against the floor. I opened doors I hadn't touched since I left 3 months earlier. The guest room now had a new throw rug, a cream reading chair, a vase with fake eucalyptus on the windowsill. No signs of a child, no books, no toys, no scent of grape-scented shampoo or crumpled drawings in corners. I opened what used to be Kaylin's bedroom. It was spotless. Not just tidy, sterile. The bed was perfectly made. The bookshelf had only 3 books, all spines unbent. The nightstand had a single, untouched lamp and no fingerprints. Her name wasn't on the door anymore. I looked in the closet. One dress hung there, new, tag still dangling from the sleeve. Where were the messy piles of clothes she used to scatter everywhere? Where was the sock she always lost behind the bed? Where was she? I went back downstairs. Kaylin was sitting on the couch now, her hands folded in her lap. The TV was on low, some animated show I didn't recognize. But she wasn't watching. "Why isn't she sleeping in her room?" I asked Seraphine quietly. "She likes the couch," she said, shrugging. "Makes little forts, says it's cozy. Her room looks unused. She's imaginative. You know how kids are. She's growing out of things fast." I looked at her. She smiled. But there was nothing behind it. No warmth, no motherly pride, just polite deflection. And that polite tone? That was the part that scared me more than yelling would have. Kaylin looked at me just once during that whole conversation. Just once. And I swear, it was like she was asking me not to say more. I waited until Seraphine left the room. Then, I knelt in front of Kaylin. "Do you want to sleep in your bed tonight?" I whispered. She looked at me, then at the hallway, then shook her head. "Sweetheart, why?" She shrugged. "I don't like the dark up there." It wasn't the dark. It was whatever the dark had been hiding. Later that evening, while Seraphine was making another meal no one had requested, I sat in the den pretending to read. My eyes were on the fireplace, but my ears were tuned in. "She's acting weird," Seraphine said to someone on the phone, her voice just low enough. "He's back, and already digging like I've done something wrong." I closed the book. We were trained in war to notice the absence of noise. The quiet that comes before something goes wrong. The stillness that screams louder than any explosion. And in that house, Kaylin's silence was the loudest thing I'd ever heard. I didn't see a room for her in that house. And worse, no one else seemed to notice. By late afternoon, the house had settled into a kind of silence that didn't feel restful. It felt rehearsed. Like the quiet wasn't natural. It was choreographed. Kaylin was perched on the window seat, a thin blanket around her shoulders, her stuffed bear cradled to her chest. Her lips were moving, slow and soft, but no sound reached me. From where I stood, still in the archway of the hallway, I watched her. She wasn't singing or humming. She was talking to the bear, words shaped carefully, like they weren't meant for anyone else's ears. Her back was straight, legs dangling, stiff, and her eyes, those didn't lift. Not for the cartoon on TV, not for Seraphine calling from the kitchen, not even when I said her name. There's a saying in fieldwork: children talk to toys not just for comfort, but when adults stop listening. I'd heard it first from a trauma psychologist during a military briefing. Back then, I thought it was metaphorical. Now, it felt like gospel. I approached slowly, not wanting to interrupt. When she finally noticed me, she stopped mid-whisper and hugged the bear tighter. I didn't ask what she was saying. She wouldn't have told me anyway, not in front of anyone else. "Hey, sweetheart," I said, kneeling beside her. "Can I borrow your bear tonight? Just need to fix his ear. Looks a little loose." She blinked slowly, then nodded. It wasn't fear, it was resignation. That night, after Seraphine had gone to bed and Kaylin was asleep on the couch again, still not her bed, I took the bear into the garage with a sewing kit and a flashlight. It had a tiny stitch under the left arm, newer thread than the rest. I used the seam ripper gently, my hands steady in the way they always were when disarming something delicate. Inside the seam, tucked into the padding, was a small, crumpled piece of yellow-lined paper. I unfolded it. "If I tell, I'll get locked again." I stared at it for a long time, letting the words settle in like cold water on bare skin. The kind of wet that soaks into bone. Locked. Again. Locked where? By whom? And what did she mean by again? I pressed the note flat against my knee and just sat there. My breath came slow, my thoughts sharp. Rage wanted to rise, but it couldn't. Not yet. Rage without proof was just noise, and noise wouldn't save her. I folded the note and slid it into the inside pocket of my coat. Then, I stitched the bear back up. Careful, precise, like nothing had ever been disturbed. I didn't want her to know I'd seen it yet. I needed to know more. A little later, I slipped out the back door for air. The cold bit at my cheeks, but I didn't care. The snow had stopped, but clouds still hung low, swollen with more to come. I stood by the fence, looking toward Mrs. Inez's yard. Her porch light was off, but the curtain twitched like someone watching. A few seconds later, her door creaked open just enough for her head to peek through. "You all right out there?" she asked in a hush, like we were in church. I needed air. She stepped out fully, a cardigan wrapped over her nightgown. "I wasn't gonna say anything," she murmured. "But I've heard things, not screams. Those are obvious. What scares me are the quiet ones, like someone's crying, but trying not to wake the house." My stomach twisted. "Why didn't you report it?" "I did," she said, eyes darting. "Months ago, but then I got let go. Seraphine said I overstepped, told folks I was senile." Inez leaned closer. "If you love that girl, you better not look away like the rest of us did. Don't let them fold her into silence." I nodded, no words left in me. Just a breath that came out colder than the air around it. When I went back inside, the house was dim again. Too still. I walked past the hallway mirror and caught my own reflection. Not tired, not angry, just still. Like something inside me was locking into place. That note stayed in my coat pocket all night, pressing against my chest like a second heartbeat. Whatever again meant, it wasn't going to happen on my watch. That night, I didn't sleep. But I learned how silence screams when no one listens. By the time the sky had turned steel gray again, I found myself climbing the stairs with a purpose I hadn't named yet. The hallway was still. No creaks, no warmth. Just walls that had seen too little of a child. I opened Kaylin's door. Same room, same silence. But that night, I looked with different eyes. The bed was made, Perfectly so. Sheets tucked like a hotel's. A single book on the nightstand. Pristine, unread. The desk was bare. No stickers, no doodles. Not even the stray crayon marks kids always leave behind like breadcrumbs. I pulled open the closet doors. Sparse. One dress hung on a plastic hanger. Tag still on. Never worn. I held it in my hands for a moment, felt the fabric. Who buys a dress a child never wears? I whispered to no one. There was a dust-free box of shoes below, never opened. It wasn't just too clean, it was untouched, unlived. This room wasn't for Kaylin, it was for the idea of her. I stood in the center of it all and turned slowly, letting my eyes map the space. Something in my gut twisted, like standing in a stage set, scripted, polished, fake. Later, downstairs, Seraphine was pouring herself wine in the kitchen, while Kaylin sat curled into the same corner of the couch, silent. I offered to bathe her, and Seraphine shrugged like it was a favor she didn't need, but wouldn't argue about. Kaylin followed me upstairs wordlessly. In the bathroom, I filled the tub with warm water and helped her undress. She didn't flinch, not really. But when I saw the mark on her upper thigh, the world froze. A bruise. Deep, dark. Not fresh, but not old either. And not in a place you could get from climbing a tree or tripping over Legos. My voice stayed soft. "Sweetheart, did you fall?" Kaylin stared down at the water, toes skimming the surface. "Maybe," she said. "Where? When?" She shrugged. "I don't remember." I sat beside the tub, heart pounding. "Kaylin, it's okay to tell me." She didn't look at me. I forgot. But she hadn't. I knew it. I'd heard soldiers say the same thing. Not because they'd forgotten, but because remembering came with punishment. She soaked quietly, skin pale against the bubbles. I dried her off, dressed her in pajamas, and walked her back downstairs. When she lay down again on the couch, she turned her face to the cushions before I could kiss her forehead. Seraphine glanced up from her glass. "She gets moody when she's tired." I didn't answer. After Kaylin fell asleep, I walked back into the kitchen and opened the fridge. A class photo was pinned to the door with a smiley face magnet, one I hadn't noticed before. I pulled it free, scanned it. 21 children. 20 sat cross-legged or on their knees, smiling. One stood alone, Kaylin, off to the right. Not smiling. Legs crossed awkwardly. Arms stiff at her sides, like she wasn't sure she belonged. I texted her teacher. "Did Kaylin refuse to sit for the picture?" The reply came fast. "Yes." She said she felt better standing. Didn't want to say why. Didn't want to say why. I stared at the screen, the words swimming. Every inch of my body told me something was deeply wrong, but the evidence was still soft, scattered, too easily dismissed. But I was beginning to see a pattern. Staged spaces, practiced lines, rehearsed indifference. It wasn't just that Kaylin's room was too clean. It was that she wasn't in it. Not in the scent of the sheets, the wear on the carpet, the drawings on the wall. There was no trace of her anywhere, and somehow no one had noticed. And now there was this bruise, this picture, this stillness. The absence of mess isn't cleanliness, it's concealment. I stared at Seraphine from across the room. She caught my gaze but didn't flinch, just lifted her glass again and said, "Everything all right?" I swallowed the answer that tried to rise, because I knew what would happen if I pushed now. She'd spin it, smooth it, turn it into my paranoia, and without proof, I'd only be the veteran who'd seen too much to think straight. I looked back down at the photo. I didn't know what scared me more, the bruise I found, or how close I was to ignoring it too. Christmas morning arrived like a whisper. No rustling of wrapping paper, no giggles echoing down the hallway. Just the hum of the refrigerator and the faint clink of Seraphine stirring her coffee. I watched her from the kitchen doorway, her back turned, robe crisp, posture unnaturally perfect. She looked like a woman auditioning for peace, not living it. Kaylin sat silently at the table, legs swinging under her chair. She wore the same pajamas from the night before. mismatched socks, and eyes that never rose from her plate. I placed a hand on her shoulder gently, and she didn't flinch this time, but she also didn't lean in. I'd spent most of my life trying to keep peace, between squads, in barracks, in a marriage where silence passed as survival. But that morning, something changed. My silence had started to rot. Peace kept in silence is just pain with better lighting. I don't know if I thought it or heard it in my head, but it was loud enough to make me act. I excused myself after breakfast, claiming I needed a walk, and drove Kaylin to Mrs. Browning's house 2 blocks over. She was an older widow who watched Kaylin on occasion when Seraphine was too tired or had her hands full. I asked her to keep Kaylin for the morning. I didn't explain. She didn't ask. 10 minutes later, I sat in the sterile waiting room of the local CPS office, holding a manila folder in one hand and Kaylin's stuffed bear in the other. The receptionist looked up with wide eyes when I said my name. A few minutes passed before an agent, a young man, probably early 30s, ushered me into a small room with laminate floors and coffee-stained chairs. I laid everything out: the photos of the bruises, the note from the bear, the timeline. I didn't raise my voice. I let the weight of the paper do the talking. He studied it, nodding occasionally, then said, "We see cases like this, but unless the child makes a clear statement, our hands are tied." "Tied to what?" I asked, calm and clear. "To policy or to fear of being wrong?" He paused. "Children say all sorts of things. We can't act without more direct confirmation." "She's 6, I said, sharper than I meant. "She said her legs hurt. She said she can't sit. She hid a note in her stuffed bear that said, 'If I tell, I'll get locked again.'" "What more direct would you like? Signed affidavit?" He sighed, and I could feel the page turning. The moment when your truth doesn't fit their boxes. He stood, polite but final. "We'll make a note of this. But unless there's new information or someone reports witnessing abuse directly—" "Got it," I said, standing. "System doesn't fail people. People in systems fail to act." Back home, the house smelled like ham. Seraphine was setting the table for dinner, cheerful, over-cheerful. Vera sat at the end of the table, sipping from a wineglass like a queen dismissing a servant. Jory slouched into his chair, phone in hand, earbuds dangling like afterthoughts. We sat. The silence tasted thick. I cleared my throat. "I need to say something," I began. "Kaylin told me something, and I found something too." Seraphine looked up, a soft smile on her face. "Is this about her wanting to sleep downstairs again?" Vera didn't even look up. "Kids, Bruce, they play hard. You're overthinking." Jory rolled his eyes. "You've been gone too long, making up stories for attention." I locked eyes with Seraphine. "She's not playing, and this isn't about me. This is about a 6-year-old who doesn't have bruises from the playground. This is about a note she wrote and hid. Because she didn't think anyone here would listen." Seraphine's expression didn't change. She folded her napkin slowly. "Maybe this isn't the home you remember." And there it was. Not denial, not shock, but dismissal. As rehearsed as any Sunday prayer. They weren't caught off guard. They were comfortable. That was what broke me. I didn't argue. I didn't yell. I slid my phone onto my lap, tapped the voice memo button, and slid it under the table. They didn't want peace. They wanted silence. If they were going to rehearse lies, I'd memorize the truth, word for word. By the afternoon of December 26th, the quiet had gone from unsettling to unbearable. Seraphine had taken Kaylin to the store for some air, leaving the house eerily still. I used the time, not to clean, not to rest, but to prepare. I drove 20 minutes across town to a strip mall I used to hate. Too many chain stores, not enough soul. But tucked between a nail salon and a vape shop, I found what I needed. A stuffed bear, nearly identical to Kaylin's favorite. Same dusty brown fur, same slightly tilted head, like it was always listening. I brought it home in a plain paper bag. In the garage, I carefully slit the seam along its back. My hands didn't shake. They hadn't during field operations in the desert, and they didn't now. I slipped in a micro recorder, voice activated, high sensitivity. It had cost more than I should have spent, but the truth rarely goes on sale. I stitched it back slowly, looping thread with a kind of reverence. If they wouldn't tell the truth, I'd let the walls speak for them. That night, I gave Kaylin the bear just before bed. "He's new, but he wants to learn your stories," I whispered. She nodded, clutching it without a word. That small movement, it told me she still trusted me. Enough. I pretended to fall asleep early in the guest room, left the door cracked just enough to hear the creaks of the floor above. It wasn't loud, just soft footsteps, a murmur I couldn't make out, and something heavier, like a door hinge strained too far. The next morning, while everyone slept, I retrieved the bear and downloaded the file. I didn't play it in the living room. I went to my car, turned the engine on low, and sat there with earbuds and the kind of dread that only comes when you already know what's waiting. First came footsteps, then Ricky's voice. "Say a word and he leaves you forever. Understand?" Kaylin didn't reply. There was a pause, then the unmistakable sound of her breathing harder, a stifled whimper buried deep in her chest. No sobbing, no screaming. Because this wasn't new. It wasn't a threat. It was routine. I sat there for a long time, hands gripping the steering wheel. Then I hit play on the second clip. The timestamp told me it was later that night. This time, Seraphine's voice. Calm, measured, too steady to be loving. "God disciplines the ones he loves, Kaylin." Then a pause. Then a slap. Sharp. Quick. Silence followed, like a vacuum. Not because no one was hurt, but because no one was allowed to cry. I removed the earbuds and sat back. The morning sun had begun creeping across the dashboard, but it didn't warm anything. That bear wasn't just a toy anymore. It was testimony. I went back inside and made breakfast like nothing had changed. Scrambled eggs, toast, a cup of coffee that I didn't drink. Seraphine came down first, dressed like she'd never known guilt. She smiled, asked if I wanted to go to church later. I nodded. Because now wasn't the time to scream. It was time to listen, to record, to wait. I uploaded the audio to a secure cloud account, backed it up twice, then printed a transcript and folded it into the back of my journal. They had their verses. I had my evidence. They preached control. I'd bring truth. They didn't know it, but their house had started talking, and I was finally listening. By midday the next day, I had already printed 3 full sets of transcripts from the recordings. The first copy I stashed behind the false panel in the laundry room. The second went into Kaylin's medical file, now kept in my personal fireproof safe. The third sat folded in my purse, underneath my wallet. I didn't plan to wave it around yet, but the moment would come. I had spent the morning combing through Kaylin's medical history, pulling every doctor's visit I could find. Checkups, vaccinations, even a trip to urgent care for a supposed stomach bug. What struck me wasn't what was there. It was what wasn't. Dates that didn't match the stories. One appointment she supposedly had never showed up in her records. Another showed up with only vitals, no notes. The more sanitized the file, the more sickness it hides. At noon, I called Officer Jennings from the local precinct. We'd gone to high school together. He was 2 years ahead of me, used to run track, known for his polite smile and easy manner. I left a vague message. "Can we talk? Off the record?" He called back 10 minutes later. "Hey, Thatcher," he said, sounding overly cheerful. "Heard you were back in town. Just wanted to ask a few questions about procedures and protections, hypothetical." There was a pause. "This about Kaylin?" I didn't answer. I didn't have to. Another pause. Then his voice changed, tight, official. "If there's a concern, you should go through the usual channels. Child services, medical professionals. You think I haven't tried that? I'm just saying. Seraphine's well respected, known to most of us here." That was all I needed to hear. That afternoon, I passed by Vera's room on my way to the back stairs and heard her on the phone. Her voice was quiet but clear through the thin door. He's been with the family since my husband passed. He'll keep this in order. She'll calm down. And just like that, it clicked. The system wasn't broken. It was built this way, prearranged, polite, protective of the wrong people. The next day, I made a pediatric appointment for Kaylin. I told them she had flu symptoms. The woman on the phone asked if we were still with Dr. Evan Marks. I said yes. At the clinic, Kaylin sat beside me in the waiting room, sketching quietly with a dull pencil. When her name was called, we followed the nurse in. The exam room smelled like plastic and lemon cleaner. Dr. Marks came in with his usual affable smile. "Thatcher," he greeted too warmly. "Wasn't expecting you." "I'm sure," I said flatly. He glanced at Kaylin's chart, then at her. "So, flu symptoms?" I cut him off. "Actually, I'd like to ask about her bruises." He blinked. Just once. "I'm not sure what you mean," he said carefully. "She's had bruising on her thighs, ribs, back. Old and new. Unexplained. What have you documented?" Dr. Marks shifted in his seat. "Seraphine always comes in prepared. Very thorough. If something happened, I'm sure she would have mentioned it. And if she didn't?" He looked away, adjusted his glasses. "There's nothing in the files." "That's exactly my point." He stood abruptly. "If you have concerns, I suggest speaking with the county medical board. I can't discuss family matters without consent." "Family matters?" I repeated. "Is that what we're calling this now?" He didn't answer. I left without saying goodbye. Outside, the wind had picked up. My phone buzzed with 3 unread texts from Seraphine, 1 from Vera. I didn't open any of them. Instead, I stood there for a moment, staring at the bare trees across the parking lot, their branches etched against the sky like veins. I wasn't the paranoid mother. I was the enemy of their ecosystem. They weren't just hiding behind walls. They were the architects of them. The night of December 28th, I turned off every light in the house but one, the floor lamp in the living room, casting a warm, contained glow that made shadows stretch long across the hardwood. I asked them to sit down. Just those words. Not a demand, not a request. "Let's sit." Seraphine gave me a look that hovered somewhere between amusement and caution. She sank into the armchair with her usual grace, one leg crossed over the other, wine glass balanced with the precision of someone used to being watched. Vera took her usual place on the far end of the sofa, clutching her mug of decaf like it was the Holy Grail. Jory slouched in from the hallway, earbuds hanging loose, only half present. Kaylin wasn't in the room. Mrs. Browning had her for a sleepover, no questions asked. "I want to clear the air," I began. Seraphine smiled. "You mean another family meeting?" "I mean we're going to stop pretending." I placed a small portable speaker on the coffee table. Pressed play. The room filled with static for a second. Then Ricky's voice, quiet, near whisper. "Say a word and he leaves you forever. Understand?" The air shifted. You could feel it. A pause. Then Seraphine's voice followed, calm and methodical. "God disciplines the ones he loves, Kaylin." Then, nothing. A slap. Crisp. Undeniable. Then silence. Vera gasped. Not loud, not dramatic. Just sharp enough to catch. Ricky sat bolt upright, his hand over his mouth, eyes wide like someone watching their own ghost walk in. Seraphine didn't move. She just blinked slowly. "Where did you get that?" "I didn't get it. It was given to me," I said, voice steady. "You recorded us?" Jory spat, standing up. "You're insane." I looked at him. "Sit down." He did. To my surprise, Seraphine finally set her glass down, the clink louder than it should have been. "I only ever wanted structure," she said. "You weren't here. I had to make decisions." I folded my arms. Structure doesn't leave bruises, and it doesn't whisper threats. "She's not easy, you know," Seraphine added, tone suddenly softer, more performative. "She lies. She's dramatic. You know how children are." I stared at her. "No, I know how survivors are. They hide, they flinch, they memorize floor patterns so they don't make a sound." Vera sipped her coffee, then wiped one eye like a reflex. Not because of what was said, because of what it meant for her. Jory stood again. You're turning this house into a circus. No one's perfect, okay? But you coming back and acting like some hero? That's what's crazy. I didn't even look at him this time. I closed the laptop that held the backup recording and stared at each of them one by one. If I hadn't come home, what would have happened next? No one answered. Seraphine reached for her glass again, but her hand trembled. Vera opened her mouth, then closed it, folded her hands in her lap. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It was verdict. No one raised their voice. But that night, something broke louder than words ever could. The morning after that meeting, I woke before the sun. The sky outside was a dull, unbroken gray, and the only thing moving in the house was the heat ticking through the vents. Kaylin slept beside me, her breath warm against my arm. She'd crawled into my bed sometime after midnight, the bear tucked under her arm like a talisman. I didn't ask when or why. I just held her. Downstairs, breakfast was silent. No one looked at me. Vera stirred her oatmeal like she was waiting for the bottom of the bowl to offer absolution. Seraphine poured orange juice without speaking, her face scrubbed clean, but too alert. Jory showed up last, shirt wrinkled, phone in hand. He didn't even sit, just leaned against the wall, eyes darting. No one apologized, but the absence of their denial felt like an obituary. Later that morning, I found Ricky stuffing clothes into a duffel bag in the upstairs hallway. Hoodie half-zipped, headphones around his neck. He looked like someone on the run, but not from guilt, from exposure. Going somewhere? I asked, arms folded. Friend's house, a few days, he muttered. You didn't think to ask? I don't need your permission, he said, avoiding eye contact. You're not even my— Finish that sentence, I said, low and calm. He didn't. I stepped closer. Give me your phone. His eyes widened. What? Now. He clutched it tighter, then in one impulsive motion, hurled it down the hall. It hit the floor and skidded under the hallway table. By the time I picked it up, he was gone. Car already pulling out of the driveway. No note, no goodbye. I took the phone to my room, charged it, and began looking. The camera roll had been cleared, messages too clean. But in the junk folder of the video app, I found it. A 38-second clip. Kaylin, in the downstairs closet, small, silent. Ricky's voice off camera, mocking her. What, you gonna cry again? You like the dark, right? Thought you liked playing hide and seek, freak. She sat in the corner, holding the bear, saying nothing, just pressing herself into the wall like she wanted to disappear. It wasn't just bullying, it was erasure. That evening, I went outside to breathe. The garden was dry, soil frozen, a patch of half-dead rosemary still clinging to life. Vera was there, sitting on the wrought iron bench she always used like a throne. She was humming, something old, maybe a church tune, maybe nothing. She didn't look up when I sat beside her. I know what you heard, she said softly. I didn't answer. After a long pause, she said, She's not my blood. I did what I had to. Better now than broken later. There was no malice in her voice, no apology either. You didn't break her, I said. She's still standing, but you're fading. She said nothing. The wind picked up. Dead leaves scuttled across the flagstone like whispers, with nowhere left to hide. That night, I closed Kaylin's bedroom door behind us and locked it from the inside. Not for fear, but for closure. I sat in the dark for a while, listening to her breathing settle into sleep. I wasn't just saving her from monsters anymore. I was closing the gates behind us. The next time we'd walk through that door, it would be with someone else holding the keys. The call came just after sunrise. I was folding laundry at the dining table, listening to the radiator clank like it was trying to speak. My phone buzzed once, Callan's name on the screen. I answered before the second ring. We've reviewed the recordings, he said, no preamble. We're sending a team today. I didn't speak for a moment. The ache in my throat wasn't sadness, it was relief clawing its way out. Thank you, I whispered, not knowing what else could possibly fit that moment. I packed Kaylin's bag slowly. This time, it wasn't with urgency. It wasn't an escape. It was a release. A jacket, 2 books, the bear. I didn't tell her we were leaving yet. I just told her we were going on a trip later, and she nodded like she already knew. By 10, a county car pulled up quietly in the driveway. No sirens, no scene, just quiet protocol. 2 officers and Callan walked up to the porch while I opened the door without being asked. Seraphine stood behind me in her robe, jaw tight. "What's this?" she asked, voice sharp like a paper cut. Callan raised a folded folder. Section 504, Emergency Custody Transfer. You can't be serious. We're removing Kaylin for her safety, effective immediately. You don't get to come into my house and— I'm not here for you, I cut in. I'm here for her. Vera stormed in from the hallway, eyes wild. You're not family, you were temporary. No, I said. I was the only one paying attention. One of the officers stood near the stairs, keeping watch as Jory appeared at the top landing, saw the uniforms, and vanished back into his room without a word. I handed Callan the transcripts, the audio device, the photo, no performance, just facts. I didn't need emotion anymore. I had evidence. Kaylin came down holding her drawing, backpack already on. No questions, no crying. Just that bear in her arms and a resolve in her little shoulders I hadn't seen before. As we walked toward the door, Seraphine blocked the frame. She's overreacting. She always does this when things get hard. I stared at her. No, you do this. You smile through harm and call it structure. She stepped aside. We walked out without looking back. That evening, after Kaylin was asleep in the guest room of the extended stay suite we checked into, I logged into my old bank account, the one I used to send money home during my deployment. I hadn't looked at it in months. I should have. There were withdrawals in Seraphine's name, thousands. Not for Kaylin, not for school or therapy or clothes. Restaurant bills, spa packages, a boutique jewelry store in St. Louis. I clicked through purchase logs like they were crime scene photos. Abuse wears many masks. Some are lined with fur and perfume. They didn't just fail Kaylin emotionally, they robbed her legacy, her future. Every dollar I sent to support a home had become a receipt for betrayal. I closed the laptop and walked quietly back into the bedroom. Kaylin had drawn something before bed. A small house. 2 stick figures under a sun. One of them was taller, holding a teddy bear. The other, holding a piece of paper. I didn't ask what it meant. I didn't have to. I packed what we had into one small suitcase the next morning. When we walked out of that suite for the last time, Kaylin held my hand and the bear in her other arm. As we passed by Seraphine's house to get to the car, I didn't glance toward the porch, and she didn't come out. Sometimes dignity is the only thing you carry out. The house didn't fall apart when we left. It simply stopped lying to itself. The first week of January came with a kind of stillness I hadn't known in years. It wasn't the silence of tension or the hush before a blow. It was something simpler, a quiet without fear. Our new place sat at the edge of town. Just 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, and a backyard with more weeds than grass. But the air moved differently here. It didn't press against the windows. It didn't hang heavy in the hallways. Kaylin and I fell into a routine quicker than I expected. Mornings were slow but warm. Oatmeal that actually got eaten, a thermos of coffee I remembered to finish, and a walk to school with a hand in mine that didn't tremble anymore. She didn't talk much at first, but she didn't hide either, and that was enough. One morning, while I packed her lunch, she sat at the kitchen table with a blue crayon in her hand. She was drawing, something she hadn't done freely in a long time. I watched as the image took shape, a stick figure with an umbrella, standing in what looked like rain. But beside it was another figure, smaller, under the same umbrella. "No more closets?" I asked quietly. She shook her head. No more corners, either. I walked over and kissed the top of her head. She paused, then asked, "Do we have to go back?" I knelt beside her chair. "Not if I'm the one holding the keys." She didn't smile, but she laughed, just a soft, shaky breath through her nose. It was real. It was hers. That night, after she went to sleep, I found something in my suitcase while searching for a pair of socks. A letter I'd written weeks ago, folded and creased, sealed in an envelope I never mailed. It was addressed to Vera. I opened it. "You didn't win," I had written. "You just faded." There was more, but that was the line that stuck. I read it aloud once, quietly, to the still room. Then, I lit a match and held the flame to the corner. Watched it curl, blacken, and fall into the sink like ash meant for no one. It was never about sending it. It was about finishing it. Not everything needs an answer. In the living room, I hung a small photo Kaylin had once snapped by accident. It was from the old house, blurry, tilted, but she was in the background, mid-laugh, chasing bubbles. I placed it by the front door of this new home, not to remember where we came from, but to remind us that we left. The house we fled taught me to listen. This one? This one teaches me to stay. We weren't waiting for someone to come rescue us anymore. We were already home. January 15th arrived cold, with clouds hanging low over Greene County like a warning. The courthouse smelled of floor wax and old paper, and the bench outside the courtroom creaked beneath my weight while Kaylin colored beside me, legs swinging, headphones in. Her drawing pad stayed open to the same page she'd started at breakfast. 2 stick figures under a slanted roof. No sun this time, but no rain either. When they called my name, I rose. The courtroom wasn't packed, but the air inside was heavy. Callan was already seated near the front, a manila folder thick with everything I had gathered. The judge looked tired, but not distracted. Seraphine sat with her lawyer 3 seats over, wearing gray like it was a costume. Ricky was absent, still in juvenile holding. Vera sat at the back, eyes blank, hands folded in her lap like a church pew had followed her there. I was the last to speak. "I'm not here because I enjoy courtrooms," I said. My voice didn't tremble. "I'm here because the people responsible for protecting Kaylin didn't." I handed the judge a flash drive. On it are 3 audio recordings, each transcribed. They're dated, verified. They include verbal threats, emotional coercion, and a physical assault that was followed by a bedtime prayer. I placed the second file on the desk. "These are Kaylin's medical visit records. You'll find gaps. You'll find bruises that were never documented, and visits that were fabricated." And finally, I set down a printout of my bank statements. These were the funds meant to support Kaylin while I was deployed. You'll see where the money went. It wasn't to her school supplies, or therapy, or clothes. It went to spa days, expensive dinners, and boutique handbags. I looked at Seraphine. "You don't get to parent a child just because you outlived hers." Silence fell like snow. Still. Undeniable. The judge took a breath, shuffled the papers slowly, like the ritual demanded time. Then he spoke. "Ricky Harper is remanded to juvenile custody for a minimum of 6 months under supervision, with mandatory psychological evaluation. Seraphine Whitlow will relinquish all custodial rights, effective immediately, and is required to undergo psychiatric assessment before supervised visitation is reconsidered. Vera Whitlow is prohibited from any contact with minors for an indefinite period, pending further investigation." No one objected, not even them. They called it justice. I called it necessary. Later that evening, Kaylin taped a drawing to the refrigerator. 2 stick figures under a roof. A single word above them. Home. The O was backward, but it was hers. She looked up at me and asked, "Can I call you Mom now?" I knelt to her level, tucked a curl behind her ear. "Only if you want to," I said. "You never have to call someone what they didn't earn." She smiled. "Not a big one, just enough." That night, after she fell asleep in her new bed, I walked out to the backyard with a letter in my coat pocket. I had written it days ago, but never sent it, folded it tight. This time, I came home, not to be welcomed, but to protect the one who didn't have the strength to scream. I buried it beneath the tree we planted last week, where the soil was still soft. A marker of sorts. Not for grief, but for growth. Some stories are shouted. Ours? It was a whisper, but I promise, everyone heard it.